Welcome back to this video about the Coronation Regalia. My name is Hugh Evans and I am author of Origin of the Zodiac. In the last video we looked at Uriel. Who was Uriel? What were the symbols associated with Uriel and what did those mean? And the conclusion was that Uriel used the rod and the orb to help chart the heavens and imparted this information to Enoch when Enoch went to be with Uriel. Now, Enoch was grandfather of Noah, so this is a long time ago, over 6,000 years ago, but we are told about this imparting of knowledge by Enoch in the book of Enoch. Since then, many monarchs have associated themselves with the rod and the orb because of its inherent implication of power and authority. Whoever has the rod and the ring or the orb has the ability to measure space and determine time. And in the ancient world, this was absolute power. In today's world, we take a lot of these things for granted. We take for granted that there are always going to be 365 days in a year, or 24 hours in a day, or a mile is a mile, or a kilometre is a kilometre. But in ancient times, this was not certain. So let's look at the Coronation Regalia and see if any of these parts relate to Uriel's tools that charted the heavens and determines the passage of time. So the centrepiece of the Coronation Regalia is the St. Edward's crown, made in 1661 at the request of Charles II. The previous crown jewels had been melted down at the end of the Civil War in England. There is also the orb and the sceptres. They were made at the same time. And some of the lesser components of the Coronation Regalia, the stirrups, the armbands, the spoon and the Apulla, which contains the anointment fluid, which is the shape of an eagle. So let's look at the orb to see what that might indicate about the heavens. Well, it has 365 diamonds, which is the days of the year. It also has 370 pearls, which is exactly 13.5 lunar months. And there is a nice story about why there perhaps are 370. There are slightly more pearls than diamonds, and that is because Charles II was from the house of Stuart, who were from Scotland, and the Scots preferred the moon as a means of calculating time than the sun, and this is represented in the Scottish flag. The white cross represents the lunar risings from maximum to minimum through its 18.6 year cycle and settings against the night sky. The orb also has 12 plus 6 rubies, sapphires and emeralds. These are the 12 signs of the Zodiac going around the circumference of the orb, and 6 signs of the northern hemisphere going over the top. The orb also has 1 amethyst and, very intriguingly, 1 glass stone, although I could not find any more information about this presumably important piece. So let's have a quick look at the lesser components of the Coronation Regalia. The stirrups are banog in the language of Uriel and Enoch, and a ban means prominence, lofty or high, and we get banner from this word. The armbands are bracelet. Breich or breich is an arm, and breith means ultimate. Cled is a delineation, and cleth is the word for a sword, the left, or the moon. So perhaps the armbands represent the moon. The spoon, a chlui, may imply a chluig, a chluin, or chluib, which is a turnaround, a quick turn, a path or a track. It is also the word used occasionally for a bucket. And this can be implied to mean the sun or the moon. Of all the celestial luminaries, the sun and the moon were the quickest to turn and to move. The eagle is an erir, and it is interesting to note that Snowdonia, where the star maps of Gwynedd are located and where Uriel instructed Enoch in the charting of the heavens, is called Eriri, and may have actually given a name to the eagle. Eriri may be made up of different components, chrid or chris, chri. It, in order to, points and courses chief, which represent the movement of the planets and the role that the star maps of Gwynedd played in Snowdonia to assist Uriel and Enoch to understand the movement of the planets and the luminaries of heaven. So let's look at the St Edward's crown now, the centrepiece made in 1661 for Charles II. It is called the St Edward's crown because it refers back to Edward the Confessor, and there is a picture of Edward the Confessor's seal dated about 1052 of the current era, and you can see he's wearing a crown, he's holding a sceptre and also an orb. It has 12 jewels around the circumference, which represent the 12 signs of the ecliptic. And there is an edge of ermine around the bottom, and the Welsh word for ermine is also a cath bella. So min means edge, and these three rings in the crown, the ring around the bottom, which is the bit that touches your head, I suppose, and the two rings that go over the top, they represent the three rings of a sphere that defined time. And if you want to check my presentation on the Megalithomania YouTube channel, you can have a full explanation of these three rings. It will also be in my book that I'm currently writing, The Origin of Time. But this is what the crown, the St Edward's crown, may represent. There are 4 cross pates, these are them, and 4 fleur-de-lis, and these are the fleur-de-lis. A cross pate, it literally means feet, and there are 4 of them, so that represents 4 feet. And cath bella literally means cat wolf, so the stoats and the weasels and the ermines, all those mammals had a collective term called cath bella. So what is interesting here is the wolf and the 4 feet. Here is another symbol that has 4 feet and a wolf's head. And here is Bellimore. He is the constellation Cepheus in the Latin nomenclature, but in the ancient British tradition, he is the God that held up and created the universe. And you can see in this picture that I have made that Ballymore is supporting the stars, and above his head are the pole star and the 4 stars around the circumference of the celestial heaven. And that is what the constellation is made up of, 5 stars. And here is the number 4 in the same representation. There are 4 cardinal directions from the viewer in the middle, and above is the pole star, and this is why the number 4 has this shape. And it also represents the constellation Cepheus and Ballymore. And in my book, The Origin of Numbers, I explain all the numbers and how they interrelate. So let's move on, and the next items to have a look at in the Coronation Regalia are the Sceptres, and there are 3. These were also made in 1661, and that's an important date, as we will find out, under Charles II's instructions. Here we see the late Queen Elizabeth II at her coronation holding 2 sceptres at the same time, and the orb has gone somewhere, but it must have been important during the ceremony that the Queen held both sceptres, and maybe we'll see King Charles III doing the same thing in the coronation that will happen in the next few days. So let's come back to these 2 sceptres. This is the sovereign sceptre with cross, and this is its length. It is 2 remen long. The distance between 2 of its bands on the shaft of the sceptre is the royal cubit, and the length from the base to the join between the sceptre and the globe at the top is 1 megalithic yard. So why are these dimensions important? Well, the Queen or the King is holding the sceptre to show the authority to control these distances, these measurements. And these measurements have been enshrined or built into this sceptre from 1661. And here is a representation of the relationship between the megalithic yard, the royal cubit, and the remen. And the megalithic yard was first proposed by Professor Alexander Thom, who was Professor of Engineering at Oxford University, having surveyed many megalithic sites around Britain and Europe. The megalithic yard was common to their dimensions, and the royal cubit and the remen are used in ancient Egypt to build pyramids and other structures there. So there is a direct relationship between these distances. And if you divide 1 megalithic yard less 1 remen by 1 remen, you get phi, the constant phi. So this ratio is intrinsically built into this sceptre. And let's look at the sovereign sceptre with dove, also made in 1661. The second of the 2 sceptres that the Queen was holding at her coronation. And we can see that the distance from the base to the bottom of the globe is 1 metre. I'd put almost there because I'm having to work from a picture. The overall length can be described in sections, and the ratios of those sections are pi and phi, and this was built into the sceptre in 1661. Over 100 years before the meter was defined by Napoleon, supposedly. I think the meter was extracted from the French king at the time of the French Revolution. So these are Uriel's tools used to measure the universe and chart the passage of time, and including the luminaries of heaven, the stars, the planets, the sun and the moon. In my next video, I will be looking at the relationship between Karnak in Egypt and Karnak in France. The Egyptians were using the royal cubit, and the megalithic builders in Brittany in France were using the megalithic yard to build their structures, and there is a link between these two sites. In my book, The Origin of Numbers, I talk about the origin of pi and phi. So I hope you'll join me next time. Thank you for listening today, and I hope that you enjoy the coronation for what it is, a long, ancient ceremony that deserves to be continued because it is our shared history across the globe. Thank you very much. Goodbye.